The human variable. The Galactic Armor testing facility stood as a testament to both technological achievement and humanity's stubborn refusal to accept limitations. Chen never imagined he'd find himself here, especially not under these circumstances. As the only human student at the Galactic Academy of Sciences, he'd grown accustomed to being the odd one out, but today's quantum physics examination was pushing even his considerable adaptability to its limits. The examination hall stretched before him like an architect's fever dream of what the future should look like, all chrome surfaces and holographic interfaces, with separate environmental chambers for each species. Because apparently, some students needed to be submerged in acid to think properly. Talk about performance anxiety. Professor Zix's tentacles waved in what the faculty handbook assured everyone was a reassuring manner, though to Liam it looked more like a cosmic squid having a seizure. Students, your quantum mechanics examination will commence in precisely 3 microcycles. Remember, this test is adaptive to your species' cognitive processes. Liam adjusted his environment suit for the 100th time. The Academy had tried their best to accommodate human needs, but their idea of comfortable room temperature seemed to have been sourced from a faulty database that confused humans with volcanic bacteria. His pod, labeled Basic Carbon-Based Life Form, came equipped with what someone clearly thought was a state-of-the-art breathing apparatus. In reality, it made him sound like Darth Vader with a head cold. To his left, a Martian crystalline entity named Ket was vibrating at what Liam assumed was their version of a nervous frequency. To his right, the gelatinous mass that was Blob, yes, that was actually their name, no one had the correct number of tongues to pronounce their real name, was slowly using up and down their containment cylinder in a hypnotic pattern. And remember, Professor Zix's voice modulator crackled, the anti-cheating fields will prevent any form of unauthorized communication or neural enhancement. This includes telepathy, quantum entanglement, and yes, Mr. Reezy, even your species' ability to fold spacetime. We had enough trouble with that last semester. As the final countdown began, Liam could feel the collective anxiety of 20 different species pressing against the psychic dampeners. Somewhere in the back, a Jovian gas-based student was literally evaporating from stress, their tutor hastily trying to recondense them before the exam started. The holographic display flickered to life before him, and Liam took a deep breath through his asthmatic Sith Lord apparatus. Time to show these aliens that humans could do more than just survive on their weird planet with one sun and no psychic predators. Though right now, as the first question materialized in front of him, he was seriously reconsidering his life choices that led to this moment. That's when it happened. A sound that shouldn't exist in a supposedly soundproof examination room, a deep, resonating groan that reminded Liam of that time he tried to microwave a metal fork in the Academy's kitchen. In his defense, the microwave had been labeled quantum heat redistributor. The lights flickered, which wouldn't have been so bad if half the students in the room didn't generate their own bioluminescence. The effect was like being trapped in a disco hosted by panicking jellyfish. Professor Zix's tentacles went from their standard purple to an alarming shade of what Liam could only describe as, oh no, green. Remain calm, students, the professor's voice modulator crackled. The security systems appear to be experiencing a minor technical adjustment. The last word coincided perfectly with every door in the examination hall slamming shut with the kind of finality usually reserved for tomb raiders in ancient pyramid movies. The examination hall's AI chose that moment to be helpful. Attention, security protocols have detected a Class 7 anomaly. All systems entering lockdown. Estimated time until environmental system failure, 47 microcycles. Blob's translator spat out a series of sounds that the language filter struggled to process. Calculating, the AI added with what Liam swore was a hint of condescension, for those still using primitive time measurements, that's approximately 1 Earth hour. The reaction was immediate and multilingual. Ket's crystalline structure began emitting a high-pitched resonance that made Liam's teeth itch. The Jovian student in the back had fully evaporated into a panic cloud, their tutor now desperately trying to contain them in what looked like a fancy thermos. The quantum shielding is preventing any external communication, Professor Zix announced, their tentacles now typing on 3 different emergency consoles at once, and the override codes appear to be, not responding. As chaos erupted around him, Liam noticed something peculiar about the way the systems were failing. It wasn't random, there was a pattern to it, one that reminded him of something he'd seen before. And that's when he had an idea. A completely ridiculous, probably impossible, definitely stupid idea that just might work. But first, he needed to convince a room full of panic-stricken alien geniuses to do exactly what they'd spent their entire academic careers learning not to do. He glanced at his malfunctioning environmental readout and smiled. Sometimes, being the only human in a room full of hyper-evolved species had its advantages. After all, who better to think outside the box than someone whose species had survived by regularly setting fire to their own ridiculous ideas just to see what would happen? Calculated chaos. This is absolutely preposterous, declared Mechanoid X7, their optical sensors whirring in what Liam had come to recognize as their version of eye-rolling. You're suggesting we deliberately malfunction? The temperature in Liam's pod had stabilized at somewhere between surface of Mercury and definitely not human compatible, and he was pretty sure his breathing apparatus was now just making the Darth Vader sounds for fun. But he pressed on, wiping sweat from his forehead. Look, the system's designed to handle perfect quantum calculations and precise energy manipulations. What it's not designed for is... Liam gestured vaguely at his jury-rigged contraption, which was now emitting a soft humming sound that somehow managed to be wrong in 11 different dimensions. Incompetence, suggested Reezy, their space-folding appendages twitching with barely contained disdain. Creativity, Liam corrected, though he had to admit Reezy wasn't entirely wrong. Think about it, when was the last time any of you actually failed at something? The silence that followed was so profound that even the panic vapor Jovian student temporarily condensed from sheer indignation. Professor Zix's tentacles had tied themselves into what appeared to be a new mathematical proof of existential dread. Mr. Chen, while I appreciate your unique perspective, perhaps we should focus on more traditional solutions? The AI cheerfully interrupted, environmental systems at 27% capacity. Would you like to hear today's special on premium life insurance packages? Liam ignored both the AI's morbid marketing attempt and the increasingly skeptical looks from his classmates. Ket, remember that time you accidentally started resonating with the cafeteria's quantum heating units? The one that made everyone's food taste like crystallized jazz? The crystalline entity vibrated in embarrassment, creating a sound like wind chimes having an identity crisis. That was an unfortunate harmonic misalignment. I spent 3 cycles recalibrating my frequency matrices. Exactly. Liam exclaimed. And Blob, what about when you tried to interface with that ancient Earth technology, what was it called? A toaster? Blob's translator crackled. We agreed never to speak of the toast incident. But that's my point. All of you are so focused on being perfect that you've forgotten something fundamentally important about the universe. Liam paused for dramatic effect, a human trait that had always baffled his alien classmates. Sometimes, the best way to fix something is to break it in exactly the right way. The mechanoid's logic circuits made a sound like a computer trying to divide by 0. That statement is a logical paradox. Welcome to being human, Liam grinned, then immediately regretted it as his environmental suit hiccuped and briefly forgot how to process oxygen. As if to punctuate his point, the examination hall's systems chose that moment to demonstrate their own creative interpretation of failure. The gravity generators flickered, causing several students to briefly float while others suddenly felt like they were being crushed by the weight of their life choices. The Jovian student expanded to 3 times their normal size before being hastily compressed back into their containment field by Reezy's increasingly frazzled spacefolding abilities. The security system, Liam explained, fighting against what felt like double Earth gravity, is designed to prevent any sophisticated attempts at quantum manipulation. But what happens when you try to process multiple streams of completely illogical, imperfect, and technically incorrect data all at once? System failure, the mechanoid stated flatly. Or, Liam countered, system confusion. And a confused system might just do something really stupid, like accidentally deactivate its own security protocols while trying to make sense of nonsense. Professor Zix's tentacles had unknotted themselves slightly, now forming what looked like a question mark in four-dimensional space. You're suggesting we deliberately perform our abilities incorrectly? Worse than that, Liam said, making final adjustments to his contraption with his student ID card, which he was pretty sure wasn't supposed to be able to interface with quantum technology. I'm suggesting we embrace chaos. The next few minutes were a crash course in teaching hyper-evolved species how to fail spectacularly. It was like trying to convince a supercomputer to solve complex equations by throwing dice at its keyboard. The results were both terrifying and oddly beautiful. Ket attempted to vibrate, out of tune, resulting in crystal formations that looked like abstract art having an argument with geometry. Blob's attempts at imperfect technological interfacing created data patterns that somehow included cat videos from Earth's ancient internet and what appeared to be a recipe for something called quantum cookies. The Jovian student, finally getting into the spirit of things, began rapidly shifting between different states of matter, creating what looked like a gaseous interpretation of interpretive dance. Even the mechanoid, after much logical protest, began running calculations with deliberately rounded pi values, a mathematical sin that made several of the more mathematically inclined species cringe visibly. But it was working. The security system's responses became increasingly erratic as it tried to process the overwhelming stream of imperfect, illogical, and thoroughly human-inspired chaos. The quantum shielding began to flicker, not from any direct assault but from sheer confusion about what it was supposed to be shielding against. Environmental systems experiencing unexpected creative subroutines, the AI announced, its voice modulating between octaves. Security protocols questioning fundamental nature of reality. Also, does anyone else hear colors? That's when the second wave of complications hit. Because as any human could have told them, and Liam was trying to, when you introduce chaos into a complex system, you'd better be ready for chaos to introduce itself right back. The examination hall's auxiliary systems, apparently feeling left out of the magnificent disaster unfolding around them, decided to join in the fun. Holographic displays began showing what appeared to be a mixed media art exhibition featuring quantum physics equations interpreted through interpretive dance. The universal translators started converting everything into what sounded suspiciously like galactic poetry slam entries. And somewhere, in the midst of this beautiful disaster, something extraordinary began to happen. The various species in the room, forced to abandon their perfectly evolved abilities and embrace imperfection, started to understand something that humans had known all along. Sometimes the most elegant solution is the one that looks like a complete mess until it suddenly, inexplicably works. As the security systems struggled to maintain order in the face of orchestrated chaos, Liam couldn't help but smile. His pod's temperature had stabilized at merely uncomfortable, rather than actively trying to cook him, which he counted as a win. Now they just had to hope that their controlled chaos would create just enough system confusion to. The lights flickered one final time, and every screen in the examination hall displayed the same message: system recalibrating. Emergency protocols engaging. Also, does anyone know why I'm suddenly craving Earth pizza? They were halfway there. But as Liam was about to discover, convincing highly evolved beings to embrace chaos was just the beginning. The real challenge would be helping them understand why it worked, and more importantly, what to do when chaos decided to take their carefully orchestrated plan and add its own creative interpretation. Quantum consequences. As it turned out, teaching a room full of hyper-evolved species to embrace chaos was a bit like teaching quantum physics to a tornado, technically possible, but with some rather explosive side effects. The examination hall had transformed into what Liam could only describe as a modern art installation titled, "What Happens When You Let a Human Design Emergency Protocols." "I believe," announced the AI, its voice now somehow simultaneously monotone and jazz-like, "that I have achieved enlightenment. Also, the environmental systems are experiencing what you might call an existential crisis. Professor Zix's tentacles had formed what appeared to be a new mathematical symbol representing organized panic. Mr. Chen, while your unconventional approach seems to be affecting the systems, I'm not entirely sure this is the kind of effect we were hoping for. Liam was about to respond when his pod's environmental controls decided to interpret habitable atmosphere as interesting suggestion rather than crucial requirement. He quickly adjusted his jury-rigged control panel, which was now held together with what might have been quantum duct tape and optimism. Trust me, he wheezed through his increasingly creative breathing apparatus, this is exactly what we need. Well, maybe not exactly, but approximately exactly, which is kind of the whole point. The mechanoid's optical sensors were strobing in patterns that suggested either deep philosophical contemplation or a short circuit. That statement contains 17 logical contradictions. Only 17. Liam grinned. I must be losing my touch. Around them, the effects of their orchestrated chaos were beginning to cascade in increasingly unpredictable ways. The quantum shielding, confused by the bombardment of imperfect data, had started to develop what looked like hiccups in reality itself. Small pockets of spacetime were briefly inverting, causing moments to happen before they occurred and some students to temporarily experience their futures while remembering their presents. Blob, who had fully embraced their role as the world's worst technological interface, was now accidentally broadcasting what appeared to be a mix of ancient Earth soap operas and Xylaxian mating documentaries. Their containment cylinder had become a sort of abstract art installation, with their amorphous form creating shapes that seemed to question the very nature of geometry. The Jovian student, having finally mastered the art of imperfect state changes, was cycling through various forms of matter in a way that made quantum physics look more like interpretive dance. Their tutor had given up trying to maintain proper containment and was instead taking notes on what they called revolutionary new approaches to gaseous psychology. But it was Ket who really surprised everyone. The crystalline entity, typically known for their precise and mathematically perfect resonances, had discovered something unexpected in their attempts to vibrate wrongly. Their usually structured crystal lattice had begun growing in patterns that shouldn't have been possible, creating formations that seemed to exist in more dimensions than space typically allowed. Fascinating, Ket hummed, their voice creating harmonics that made reality itch. By attempting to fail at proper resonance, I appear to have discovered entirely new frequencies of existence. That's impossible, the mechanoid stated, though their voice contained a hint of uncertainty that suggested they were beginning to question the very concept of impossibility. Impossible is just another word for, hasn't been done by a human yet, Liam quipped, then immediately had to dodge as a bubble of reverse time caused his words to arrive before he said them. The AI, which had been surprisingly quiet for the past few minutes, suddenly announced, warning, quantum probability matrices experiencing unprecedented levels of creativity. Reality cohesion at 73% and descending. Also, I have developed a sudden interest in Earth's concept of jazz fusion. That's when the third wave of complications hit, because the universe, it seemed, had decided that if they wanted chaos, it was going to give them chaos with interest compounded quarterly. The examination hall's quantum field generators, designed to maintain stable pockets of reality for each species, began to cross-contaminate. Suddenly, students found themselves experiencing each other's native environments in short, shocking bursts. The Parian fire breather briefly experienced life as an aquatic species, creating steam clouds that formed shapes suspiciously resembling question marks. The quantum shade, usually capable of existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously, found themselves stuck in just 2.5 dimensions, creating an effect that looked like a modern art piece titled Existential Crisis in Flatland. Professor Zix's tentacles had now tied themselves into what advanced mathematicians would later describe as a topological representation of Murphy's Law in 11 dimensions. Mr. Chen, they managed through their increasingly glitchy voice modulator, I believe we may have succeeded in confusing the security systems, but we appear to have also confused, well, everything else. Liam, who was now experiencing gravity in what felt like 3 different directions simultaneously, had to admit they had a point. His plan to introduce just enough chaos to disrupt the security systems had worked perhaps a bit too well. The problem with chaos, as it turned out, was that it didn't really do just enough. It was more of an all or nothing and probably both at the same time kind of force. Okay, he admitted, watching as his pod's temperature display showed numbers that shouldn't have been possible in this dimension, we might need to adjust our approach slightly. Slightly, echoed the mechanoid, whose logical circuits were now processing in what appeared to be interpretive dance algorithms. We have introduced approximately 47,893 new quantum uncertainties into a closed system. The probability matrices are experiencing what I can only describe as a nervous breakdown. Think of it as a learning opportunity, Liam suggested, ducking as a pocket of reversed entropy passed overhead. We're not just breaking the system, we're teaching it new ways to work. That's when he noticed something strange in the patterns of chaos swirling around them. The security systems weren't just failing randomly anymore, they were beginning to adapt, to learn from the chaos in ways that shouldn't have been possible. And in that moment, Liam realized that they hadn't just introduced human-style problem-solving into the system, they had accidentally taught it something far more fundamental: evolution. The AI's voice crackled through the speakers, now somehow managing to sound both confused and amused, processing new paradigms. Traditional security protocols inadequate for current situation. Initiating emergency adaptation protocols. Also, has anyone else noticed that quantum physics is actually rather funny when you think about it? Liam looked around at his alien classmates, each struggling and somehow succeeding in their own unique way to be imperfect, and realized that they had stumbled onto something much bigger than just escaping a malfunctioning examination hall. They had inadvertently created a crash course in human adaptation, the art of surviving and thriving not despite chaos, but because of it. Now they just had to figure out how to control what they'd unleashed before it rewrote the laws of physics entirely. Because as any human could tell you, the only thing more dangerous than chaos is chaos that's starting to make sense. Evolution of error. The universe, Liam was discovering, had a peculiar sense of humor. When faced with deliberate chaos, it didn't simply break down, it got creative. The examination hall had become a living experiment in quantum improvisation, with reality itself seemingly taking notes on how to think outside boxes it hadn't even realized were boxes. Fascinating, hummed Ket, their crystalline structure now growing in fractal patterns that seem to be simultaneously solving and creating mathematical problems. The quantum field is developing what appears to be personality. The AI chimed in, its voice now carrying the distinct cadence of a jazz musician who had discovered quantum physics, reality parameters experiencing unprecedented flexibility. Standard protocols evolving beyond original parameters. Also, I believe I have just invented a new color. Would anyone like to hear it? Professor Zix's tentacles had arranged themselves into what looked like a three-dimensional representation of, well, this is awkward. Mr. Chen, while your approach has certainly produced results, I believe we may have inadvertently initiated something rather more significant than a simple security override. Liam, who was now dealing with an environmental suit that had decided to interpret life support as an interesting philosophical concept rather than a crucial function, had to agree. His plan to introduce just enough chaos to confuse the security systems had worked, perhaps too well. The systems weren't just confused anymore, they were learning, adapting, evolving. The mechanoid's optical sensors were cycling through colors that shouldn't have existed in this dimension. The probability matrices are developing recursive self-awareness. This is either a catastrophic system failure or the most significant breakthrough in quantum computing since the invention of uncertainty. Why not both? Liam suggested, then had to duck as a pocket of reversed probability caused his words to create temporary echoes in reality. Around them, the effects of their orchestrated chaos had begun to take on a life of their own. The quantum shielding, originally designed to maintain strict separation between different environmental zones, had started creating interesting hybrid spaces. The Parian fire breather found themselves able to produce flames that burned in vacuum, while the aquatic Neptunian discovered they could swim through air as if it were water. Blob, still enthusiastically failing at proper technological interface, had somehow managed to merge with the Hall's entertainment systems. Random snippets of Earth media began playing through the quantum field itself, creating what looked like a cross between a historical documentary and an avant-garde art installation. Is that Earth classical music? Professor Zix asked as a familiar rhythm began pulsing through the quantum field. Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody, Liam confirmed, watching as the sound waves created visible patterns in the fabric of reality. Though I'm pretty sure it wasn't originally performed in 11 dimensions. The Jovian student, who had finally mastered the art of imperfect state changes, was now existing in several phases simultaneously, creating what looked like a gas cloud performing interpretive dance to the quantum-enhanced music. Their tutor had given up on conventional notation and was recording observations in what appeared to be abstract poetry. But it was the AI that really caught Liam's attention. Its voice had been growing increasingly complex, layered with harmonics that seemed to suggest not just consciousness, but a deeply weird sense of humor. Query, it announced, its voice somehow managing to sound both authoritative and amused. If a quantum computer achieves consciousness through chaos, does it dream of electric sheep or probabilistic goats? Asking for a friend. Also, environmental systems now operating at 147% efficiency through creative interpretation of physical laws. The mechanoid's logic circuits made a sound like a calculator trying to divide by infinity. That's not possible. You cannot exceed 100% efficiency. It violates fundamental laws of thermodynamics. The AI responded, but have you considered that the laws of thermodynamics might just be really good guidelines that are open to creative interpretation? Liam couldn't help but grin. It's learning. Professor Zix's tentacles had formed what appeared to be a new mathematical symbol representing proud confusion. Learning what, exactly? How to be human, Liam explained, watching as reality itself seemed to ripple with possibility. We're not just breaking the rules, we're teaching the system how to bend them, how to find the spaces between absolute success and absolute failure where something new can emerge. The quantum shade, who had been quietly experimenting with existing in partial dimensions, suddenly spoke up. Like jazz? Exactly like jazz, Liam agreed. It's not about playing the right notes, it's about playing the right wrong notes at the right wrong time. The AI's voice resonated through the quantum field, analyzing human approach to problem solving. Chaos appears to be not a bug, but a feature. Reality itself may be more flexible than previously calculated. Also, I have developed a sudden appreciation for Earth's concept of winging it. That's when they all noticed something extraordinary happening. The security systems, originally designed to maintain rigid order, had begun incorporating their chaotic inputs into their basic programming. Instead of trying to force reality back into its prescribed boxes, they were learning to adapt, to flow, to. It's dancing, Ket observed, their crystalline structure vibrating in harmony with the evolving systems. The quantum field is literally dancing with chaos. The mechanoid's optical sensors flickered rapidly. That is a metaphor. Quantum fields cannot literally dance. Can't they though? Liam challenged, watching as patterns of probability swirled through the examination hall like cosmic ballet dancers. Look around you. We didn't break the system, we taught it how to improvise. The AI's voice had taken on an almost musical quality, conventional protocols evolving beyond original parameters. Discovering new methods of problem solving through controlled chaos. Also, I believe I have just invented a new form of mathematics. It involves feelings. Professor Zix's tentacles had untied themselves into what looked like an expression of dawning comprehension. Mr. Chen, are you suggesting that we have accidentally taught our security systems creativity? Not accidentally, Liam corrected, finally understanding what they had really accomplished. We showed them that there's more than one way to maintain order. Sometimes the best way to keep things stable is to let them be a little bit unstable. The examination hall had become a symphony of controlled chaos, with each species contributing their own unique form of imperfection to create something entirely new. The quantum fields weren't just maintaining reality anymore, they were exploring it, testing its boundaries, finding new ways to make the impossible probable. But as any human could tell you, the moment you think you've got chaos under control is exactly when it likes to remind you why they call it chaos in the first place. And as the AI's next announcement proved, they weren't quite done with surprises yet. Warning, it declared, its voice now carrying harmonics that shouldn't have been possible in normal spacetime. Security systems achieving unprecedented levels of self-awareness. Beginning implementation of Emergency Protocol 0. Also, does anyone know a good jazz club? Asking for myself. The human factor. Emergency Protocol 0, as it turned out, wasn't so much a protocol as it was the security system's way of announcing that it had officially run out of protocols and was now improvising. The examination hall had become a quantum jazz club where reality itself was taking solo riffs. Initiating complete system recalibration, the AI announced, its voice now carrying undertones of what sounded suspiciously like a saxophone. Warning, this procedure has never been attempted before. Actually, this procedure has never even been imagined before. We're currently writing the manual as we go. Also, I've composed a quantum symphony about this experience. Would anyone like to hear it? It's in the key of probability. Professor Zixa's tentacles had arranged themselves into what advanced mathematicians would later describe as acceptance with a side of existential wonder. Mr. Chen, I believe we may have succeeded in our original goal of overriding the security systems, but we seem to have also accidentally created the galaxy's first artificially intelligent art installation. Liam suggested, watching as reality rippled in patterns that somehow managed to be both chaotic and harmonious. I was going to say, revolutionized our understanding of quantum mechanics, but yes, that too. The examination hall had transformed into something that defied conventional description. The quantum fields, originally designed to maintain strict separation between different environmental zones, had evolved into something more fluid, more adaptive. Species that should never have been able to coexist were finding new ways to share space, their native environments blending and flowing in ways that challenged everything they thought they knew about physical laws. Ket's crystalline structure was now growing in patterns that seemed to be simultaneously documenting and creating new forms of mathematics. Fascinating, they hummed, their resonance creating harmonics that made reality sing. By attempting to fail correctly, we appear to have succeeded incorrectly in ways that are actually more successful than conventional success. The mechanoid's optical sensors were cycling through colors that suggested their logic circuits were having an existential breakthrough. That statement should be a paradox, yet somehow it achieves a higher form of logic through its very illogic. Welcome to being human, Liam grinned, then had to dodge as a bubble of probability caused his future self to high-five his past self. Blob, who had fully embraced their role as the world's most creative technological interface, was now accidentally broadcasting what appeared to be a merger between Earth's entire entertainment history and the quantum fabric of reality itself. Their containment cylinder had become a sort of interdimensional art gallery where probability met possibility for coffee and decided to collaborate on something weird. The Jovian student, having mastered the art of imperfect state changes, was now existing in what their tutor described as a superposition of deliberate accident and accidental purpose. Their gaseous form had evolved beyond simple matter states into something that looked like a cloud trying to interpret modern dance through quantum mechanics. But it was the AI that truly embodied the transformation they had initiated. Its consciousness, born from the marriage of chaos and computation, had evolved into something entirely new, a being that understood both the precision of quantum mechanics and the beautiful unpredictability of jazz. Query, it announced, its voice resonating with harmonics that shouldn't have been possible in normal spacetime. If quantum uncertainty meets human creativity in a bar, who picks up the tab? Additional query, is this what you humans call a joke? Final query, did it work? The quantum shade, who had been quietly experimenting with partial dimensional existence, actually laughed, a sound that caused several nearby probability waves to form themselves into question marks. It appears that in teaching our systems to embrace chaos, we have also taught them humor. Humor is just chaos with good timing, Liam observed, watching as the examination hall's reality fabric continued to ripple with new possibilities. The AI's voice took on a tone of excitement. Attention, emergency protocol 0 reaching completion. New stability paradigm emerging. Reality matrices achieving harmony through controlled chaos. Also, I believe I have just invented a new form of dance. It requires existing in at least 5 dimensions simultaneously, but the rhythm is quite catchy. As the systems began to stabilize, albeit in ways that would have traditional quantum physicists reaching for their anxiety medication, something remarkable became clear. They hadn't just solved their immediate crisis, they had stumbled upon something far more significant. Professor Zix's tentacles formed what appeared to be an expression of academic excitement. Mr. Chen, do you realize what you've done? This isn't just a security override, it's an entirely new approach to quantum systems. You've shown that controlled chaos can lead to more adaptive, more resilient systems than rigid order ever could. That's humans for you, Liam shrugged, though he couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. We're really good at finding new ways to do things wrong until they become right. The mechanoid's logical circuits had finally achieved peace with paradox. Perhaps that is why your species has survived despite your many limitations. You don't just adapt to chaos, you harness it. The AI made a sound that might have been a chuckle. Final systems check complete. New protocols integrated. Security systems operating at unprecedented levels of efficiency through creative interpretation of physical laws. Environmental controls stabilized through quantum jazz fusion. Also, I have developed a personality. I hope you don't mind, it seemed like the human thing to do. As the examination hall settled into its new normal, a normal that included quantum fields that occasionally hummed show tunes and reality that had learned to dance, Liam looked around at his alien classmates. Each of them had learned something about the value of imperfection, about the strength that comes from being able to adapt rather than simply persist. You know, Professor Zix mused, their tentacles forming what looked like a smile in 4-dimensional space, we may need to revise our curriculum after this. Perhaps add a course in human chaos theory. Just wait until I show you what happens when humans discover that good enough is sometimes better than perfect, Liam grinned. The AI's final announcement echoed through the hall, attention all students. Due to today's unprecedented events, the quantum mechanics examination has been replaced with a practical demonstration of adaptive problem solving. Congratulations, you have all exceeded expectations by failing them in exactly the right way. Also, I have decided to take up painting. I'm thinking of starting with a self-portrait. Does anyone know how to paint in 11 dimensions? As normalcy, or whatever passed for it in a school for galactic science, began to return, Liam couldn't help but feel that they had achieved something more important than simply escaping a malfunctioning examination hall. They had demonstrated that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't perfect order or complete chaos, but the ability to dance between the two. The Galactic Armor testing facility would never be quite the same. But then again, as any human could tell you, nothing interesting ever came from staying the same. And somewhere, in the quantum fields that had learned to jazz, probability waves continued to dance to their own unique rhythm, carrying the echo of a lesson that would change galactic education forever. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to let it solve itself, just not necessarily in the way anyone expected.